in a fight for plastic supremacy. Here we have our first contestant. Let's kick some cans. Versus our second contestant. Listen here, punk. To fight to the death in 5 rounds. One shall stand, and one shall live. Join us for Figure Versus. Let the games begin.
Hello and welcome to today's Figure Versus. It's the first of its kind, but it's a opportunity for me to compare different figures of the same character that try to do very similar things. In this case, we have Earthrise Ironhide. Now, from the offset, he's alright, a bit visually boring. It's definitely not a G1 accurate, if that's something you're bothered about. But robot mode is a little bit hollow. He comes with this nice little black gun. The SS-86 does come with a similarly moulded weapon. However, that figure has, I believe, 2 of them, and they're silver. Secondly, it comes with a shield. Here it is. It becomes the roof of the camper van mode. It has this kind of the port on it to hold it. It does move up and down and has those little gun bits come out. You can put blast effects in there. Henkei Ironhide, by comparison, he's a very uniquely shaped figure. He's got a bit of a backpack here, but I don't look at my figures from the back, and he's not going to poke out too much from a shelf, so it's fine. And generally though, solid stuff. This is my kind of preferred visual look for out of the two, really. I'm not going to say it's my preferred look for G1 Ironhide, but it's something definitely unique. He comes with this chromed out weapon. This is the Henkei version, Japanese. The Hasbro doesn't quite look as good, but the weapon doubles as a gun and a sword, and it plugs onto his hand quite nicely, So first round goes to Henkei Ironhide, and we're going to move on to articulation. So for the articulation on both of these, they both have shoulders that spin all the way around. They go up a decent amount. The Henkei's is a tiny bit higher than the Earthrise, and then the elbows are a bit better on the Earthrise comparative to the Henkei. They pull a 90, the Henkei's cannot. They both have wrists, but the Henkei wins due to having the hands be able to fold inwards and outwards and all around the place. The Henkei has a fairly limited head movement. You can't get it all the way around, but he does have butterfly joints that go really far forward and backwards to make up for it. The Earthrise has the better head movement. It does go all the way around successfully, but there's no movement up or down or left or right or anything. They both have waists that are fully functional. The Henkei's is a bit higher, but whatever, it doesn't make a difference. The legs on both of them kick forward a decent amount, backwards a decent amount. Then the Earthrise has slightly better knees. The thigh swivel on the Henkei does the same thing as the thigh swivel on the Earthrise, except it's a little bit lower down the leg. The knees on the Earthrise, I think I've said that already better. The ankles on the Henkei are very sturdy, nice range inwards, nice range outwards, and they have a forward and a backwards tilt. The Earthrise, on the other hand, maximum range, but they're very loose. So yeah, it's here and there. So for the transformations on both of these, it's generally a pretty straightforward experience on the Earthrise, though I did have a bit of trouble towards the end of it getting everything tabbed in. The Henkei, by comparison, it's a complicated affair for a old deluxe, or just generally a deluxe, really. The way the feet work, the way the legs kind of fold in on themselves, that's something to behold. And generally, it's not actually a bad experience for me, I don't think it's a perfect transformation by any means, but it's definitely a lot more interesting than what the Earthrise does. Now, the Earthrise's arms swinging backwards and kind of being wrapped up by the legs, that's cool and all, but I do like the way that the arms on the Henkei become the kind of back section of the vehicle. Both of them do have weapon storage as well, that's something to point out. I just don't know, because the weapon storage on the Henkei has nothing to do with parts forming or whatever, it's just somewhere you can put the gun just in case. Whereas for the Earthrise, you do have a situation where if you lose that shield, you have no finished vehicle mode, right? It really is parts forming. I'm not really the biggest kind of enemy to parts forming, but in this case, it doesn't really do it for me. I don't think it Man, do I think it was necessary? I'm not really sure, you know, because the SS-86 eventually did come along and kind of, like, it kind of foregoed the idea of parts forming entirely, you know, and you got a Voyager figure that was fairly small, to be honest, but it did actually do the job, you know. But here, it's just whatever, you know. But the Henkei, on the other hand, despite the fact it's sometimes a bit of a pain to line everything up, I generally think it's a success, you know. It's a success of a vehicle mode. It's a kind of modern interpretation of what we, or the Takara designers and stuff, thought, you know what, we can make Ironhide a modern kind of vehicle, and they turned him into a red SUV, you know. Both of them do the whole yellow stripe thing perfectly as well, which is really cool. But the Henkei's just a bit more stylish, you know. It's even got the blacked out section on the roof for the wind, what you call it, a sunscreen or whatever it is. You know, sunroof, there you go. Sunscreen's what you put on your body. But yeah, you know, it's generally solid. The Earthrise, though, it doesn't have anything like that because it's a camper van, so whatever. And just coming on to the finishing touches of the Henkei transformation, it's definitely the longer process, and tabbing the windscreen and everything in is a little bit annoying sometimes. But again, it's not an experience I hate. I generally like how the figure works. It's just a little bit messy, like in the actual kind of squishing everything together, you know. Perspective End says it's the Play-Doh factor. He also calls some things hand candy. Neither of these figures are hand candy. I generally do really like the aesthetical look of the Henkei and whatnot, and the Earthrise isn't half bad, you know, but it's just whatever, you know. And the weapon storage, as you can see here, it does slot into the bottom nicely. There's a whole port. I ain't sure on camera here, kind of accidental, but, you know, the gun just tabs into there. It holds on really securely, and yeah, that's cool. And here we have a little cutting section of me showing the Earthrise weapon storage. The pistol can actually store in the alt mode. It's something I accidentally cut out on the transformation section, so put it here just in case. I have had to untransform him a little bit, but that's a user error, right? It's not the fault of the toy. This does actually do its job effectively. It closes up perfectly fine, and then you just go give it a squish, put the roof back on, and jobs are good, right? You know, it's generally solid stuff. Both of them have gun storage. I think the Henkei is a little bit better. It's just a little bit less messy. But yeah, cool stuff. So for the alt mode comparison on this, here we have the black blobs on the Earthrise figure. You know, it's one of my least favourite things. It's got the whole red stripe going on, which is okay. It seems a little bit offset on the back end of the vehicle, so that's a definite minus. You've got the feet just hanging out on the back, pretty stupid, but it was a problem with the Siege figure. The wheels aren't pinned, the windscreen, you can see the head for it, and it's also got an ugly grey hinge. You know, it's generally not the most pleasing thing in the world, and from the bottom, you know, it's fine, but I don't care about the bottom. For the Henkei figure by comparison, you know, you've got a very panelly vehicle mode. You've got decked out chrome lights, you've got pinned wheels, you've got good weapon storage. I don't care about the bottom, just adjusting the bumper there because I accidentally missed it. You know, this whole front section and attaching the windscreen, it's not the most flush thing in the world, but it does the yellow stripe, and if you can get everything lined up, the yellow stripe will actually be central. You know, both of the figures have kind of small little issues with the yellow stripe idea, but it's something. And the Henkei does also have the blue windows, both the painted ones on the back and the clear plastic on the front. I'm very happy with that. You know, definitely, generally better than the Earthrise. So for my final thoughts on the two of them, kind of comparing, you know, categories and stuff like that. Now the Henkei here, he's a beautiful little guy, you know, in the alt mode. Definitely a bit panelly, and you know, the issues with the windscreen not going in, but generally I really enjoy it. You know, especially the blue windscreen. It's definitely something to talk about. You know, so I definitely think the Henkei has the better aesthetics across the board. You know, Henkei, whatever we're calling it. Generally, though, very, very solid stuff, you know, something I really enjoy for an old figure. And, you know, even if you've got the grey hinge in the windscreen, like, I don't really care about it too much. And like I said, you know, it's got other things like the decked out chrome lights and stuff like that. Things the Hasbro Universe 2008 figure doesn't have. But generally, though, aesthetic is really good. Accessories are solid on the Henkei. I'm only going to give the point in accessories to the Henkei purely because it can properly make use of the weapon, you know. Whereas the Earthrise, it's got like problems with the shield. He doesn't have the articulation to make effective use of it. That also brings us to articulation. So articulation, the Henkei wins out. You've got the better, movement. The shoulders go out a bit more. The hips are better. You have butterfly joints. You have better range on the feet. Brilliant stuff, The transformation process, I give it to the Henkei as well. It was like I wasn't having an enjoyable time transforming this Earthrise figure. Just kind of getting that whole back section tabbed in, and just for the line to not be straight. The yellow line, that is, it's a bit annoying. But, whatever. Can't win them all. So, articulation's going to Henkei, transformation's going to Henkei, aesthetics going to Henkei, accessories are going to Henkei. Lastly is the price issue. This Earthrise figure was exclusive to a Amazon exclusive 2-pack with Prowl. Massive pain to get hold of, and for what it's worth and what you get, I don't think it's worth it. And Prowl is kind of a problem within itself, given his knees are prone to breaking. That whole lower leg clear plastic thing. I've seen many people have issues with that mold and its retools. The Henkei, by comparison, though, very easy to get hold of. Japanese release. You could still get them for a somewhat decent price. I got them for about £16. The Earthrise, you might think I'm lying if I told you this, but I got them for about a tenner on Buy. Someone was selling them loose. I won them on auction, and even for a tenner, it's definitely worth a tenner. But I'm still not happy with it. I'm not trying to compare these on how much I paid for them. I'm trying to compare them based on how much they went for the value for money and price and stuff like that. It just feels a lot better on the Henkei. You get a thicker, sturdier toy. A lot better to handle, even though the shoulders sometimes pop off. But generally, the Henkei does a lot of things really well, and it's flawed. And that brings me over to the topic of the Studio Series 86 figure. I generally cannot recommend it, purely because it's far too expensive to get hold of now. Maybe it will get reissued at some point. But even then, I think the only thing the SS86 will do better than these is the alt mode. Not the alt mode, sorry, because that's got all the mismatched plastic. The bot mode on the SS86 could beat out the Henkei, maybe. Alright, it is a very G1 accurate, so it's somewhat boring. But it's fair, it looks like Ironhide. It doesn't do parts forming. But like I said, it's got issues like the mismatched plastic. The articulation on the 86, much like the Earthrise, is a very 5 out of 10 fair, Whereas the Henkei is much better in terms of articulation, and that's even being as old as it is. So it does suck a little bit. But I think the main takeaway here, besides the Henkei winning in absolutely every category, it just sucks that there's no truly definitive G1 Ironhide figure that is amazing across the board. Look, I'd like to talk about the masterpiece, but it's not a fair comparison, So even though I think the Henkei is truly better in absolutely every way, despite its flaws, I know it's not perfect. This has been AnimatedCHUG. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.